Hey guys, I'm Rebecca.
And I'm Tyson.
And we're with Big Shiny Robot, and we're here to talk to you about the second half of season 9 of Doctor Who. And I think it was better than the first half, honestly.
Yes, way better.
So let's run through it. Starting with episodes 7 and 8, another two-parter about the Zygon invasion.
Yes, which was fantastic because it picked up where the 50th anniversary left off.
With the Osgood box.
Yes, the Osgood box and Osgood herself, themselves, because there's the two of them.
Because there's the two Osgoods, Zygon, and one's human, and we don't know who's who.
But it was excellent the way it picked up. The episode started with flashbacks to the 50th anniversary special to kind of catch everyone up, and it was the outcome of that whole scenario. Because when you think about it, we didn't really get much of an outcome from the 50th anniversary. I just rewatched it like a week ago, just randomly, and that whole Zygon human relation thing you never really find out how that all panned out. And in this, you very much find out how that panned out and all the issues that are going on with that.
Yeah, it turns out some Zygons not so happy with the agreement, so they have kind of set up a ticking time bomb to release, or to kind of reveal all of the hidden Zygons on Earth.
And there's a ton.
Yeah,
there's like a couple million, I think.
Mm-hmm. All just hiding out. And I don't really remember what happened. So there's the first episode is Zygon Invasion, and basically what happens in that episode to drive the plot forward is Clara is kidnapped by the Zygons, and the Zygons use Clara as a disguise to try to assassinate the Doctor.
That's right. And then in the second half of the episode, much like in the 50th anniversary, again, a callback to that, the Doctor forces the Zygons and the humans to work it out because, again, everyone's thinking of the nuclear option to go to war, which is where the Osgood box comes in, which is 2 buttons, and which will, if I recall right, like it'll destroy like all of one, or like a lot of one race or the other.
And this episode, the Zygon Inversion, which is the second half of this two-parter, the Doctor gives a really good impassioned speech about war. So kind of highlighting, highlighting that fact that the Doctor gives really good monologues from time to time.
Yeah, and that was, I think I mentioned it in the first video, or I've mentioned it in other forums, but that's one part of this Doctor that I feel like is missing. As much as I love Peter Capaldi as the Doctor, there was those wonderful monologues that Matt Smith, and even at times David Tennant, brought to the Doctor in times of crisis like this. And we haven't really seen Peter Capaldi able to do that. I don't think he's really been given a scenario to make the stand as a Doctor and get up on his soapbox and give a monologue like that. And so this was excellent. Peter Capaldi nailed it, and it gave me chills.
I cried. No, I didn't. But it also, again, was one of those episodes where I was like, it would have been really cool if, because when we find out that Clara has been kidnapped by the Zygons and is in one of their weird egg hibernation things.
Stasis things, yeah.
Stasis things. I got really excited at the idea that Clara has been a Zygon this whole time, but sadly not the case.
Yeah, they didn't really pull the trigger on that. She'd only been a Zygon
for like a half hour.
Right. So I think an opportunity missed there to make people question how long has the Zygon Clara been with the Doctor. And I think it would have been a little bit more fun to go back a little further. Maybe not all the way to the beginning, obviously, but, at least to the first part of this series, or, at some point a lot earlier, I think it would have been a huge twist, because then you'd have to kind of rethink a lot of those episodes that came before.
Yeah, especially since they've been heavily foreshadowing at Clara's death throughout this whole season.
Yep.
Episode 9, Sleep No More. I don't want to talk about it, because
the sleepy eye monsters.
It's just a whole episode about eye booger monsters.
I don't think I hated it as much as you did.
Listen to this, though. Guess who it was written by?
Stephen Moffat?
No, Mark Gatiss.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Mark Gatiss wrote a super terrible episode about eye booger monsters.
That's shocking. So, yeah, we should probably run it down, though. Essentially, it's in the future. The human race has more or less conquered sleep they have these pods that you can get into, and in like 5 minutes it sends you through an entire 8-hour sleep cycle, like tricks your body into thinking it's slept for 8 hours. You get out, you feel rejuvenated, but the explanation of it essentially they were slowly turning into what looked like sand monsters.
They couldn't see. They could only hear you.
Right, and they were these sand monsters, but they weren't actually sand. It was that crust that you get on your eye, like when you wake up in the morning in the the corner of your eye.
And the Sandman song was like a big part of the episode. And they tried to do it at a different angle by using kind of like a found footage style of media telling, but didn't quite.
See, and I actually liked that as much as the found footage stuff is kind of overplayed at this point. I thought it was a cool twist. We've never seen a Doctor Who episode like that before, filmed from that kind of angle. But the monsters, when you find out the explanation of what they are, was just atrocious. It was hard to take it seriously. I mean, and that's talking about Doctor Who. So when they cross that line to where you're having a hard time buying into something in Doctor Who that you've already bought into so much, I think that's where maybe you've crossed a line. So definitely, I would actually argue that was probably the overall weakest episode of the series.
I think they had a space to fill with this season, because it's not a two-parter, it's a single episode.
Yep.
And I want my hour back, honestly. But it takes us to another kind of a first episode of maybe like a three-part story.
Yeah.
Face the Raven, which is kind of the big episode we've been waiting for this whole season.
Yes.
You see the return of Ashilda, played by Maisie Williams, and she's awesome, and she's like the mayor of this little town street thing.
Well, let's just talk about how great her run in the series was overall. Throughout, from beginning to end, she popped up way more than I thought she was.
I thought she was just in the one episode.
Yeah, like that one two-parter is what I thought. Like, I thought she was going to be in a two-parter this series. I didn't know she was going to be the anchor of this entire series. But she nailed it. I think she played the same character at different stages of her immortality, especially when we get there hell-bent at the very end, when she is at the end of the universe, playing different phases of the same person throughout their immortal life. I think she nailed it. I think she did a great job.
Yeah, so here she is at her point in her immortality where she's kind of the gatekeeper of this community of aliens and otherworldly creatures who kind of need a safe haven. What? Refugees.
Yep.
Kind of an overarching theme of this season.
I think it was a little topical. I think it was coincidental knowing when these are filmed, but it was a bunch of different aliens and species, some of which are enemies of the Doctor, taking refuge in this little pocket in the city that you can't see.
So basically, the whole point of the episode is Clara's friend Riggsy has a mysterious tattoo show up on the back of his neck that is counting down to something. And through a series of like maps and counting footsteps and like losing track of how many footsteps, you find this hidden road, or they find this hidden road, and it turns out that's where Riggsy was, and he is framed for the murder of this woman of the street, and so therefore this tattoo that's counting down on his neck is...
it's his sentence.
It's his sentence. What's the group called, like the Veil or something?
The Veil.
The Veil. And basically, Ashilda has struck a deal that at the end of his clock, the Raven comes and takes his soul away and he dies. But overall, it was just a long trap to get a hold of the Doctor. But Clara, being the adrenaline junkie that she is, trades Riggsy, doesn't trade, but takes his clock as kind of like a chess piece to kind of figure out what the actual motive of Ashilda is. And it turns out you can't give the clock back and it can't be canceled once it's been transferred.
Even Ashilda, who is in charge of handing down the sentences, she herself cannot stop the countdown. So you as the person who's been sentenced and have the countdown tattoo on you, you do have the capability, if the other person's accepting to take your sentence, that you can give it away, but like you said, you can't give it back. And so now Clara is up shit creek without a paddle, as they say.
And she gets a really nice last words, like the last 5 minutes basically, with the Doctor, and she's telling him that she's okay with this sudden death sentence that she's struck upon herself, and telling the Doctor not to get revenge on her, telling Ashilda, she's okay with this and she's recognized what she's done, and goes out to face the Raven and
Well, and I think we really see Clara at her peak of being the adrenaline junkie that she's become by being the doctor's companion. I mean, despite what we know as to be her fate, there's no way that she could have gone back to being just a normal person living a normal life. You know, Amy and Rory, you know, at the end of their time, they just wanted to get away from everything and live out their lives normally. That was never going to happen with Clara. I don't think she could ever go back to that.
And I think the thing too that they really that they put an emphasis on is how okay with it she was.
Yes.
Like she has been waiting for this moment and here it is. She can't run from it and she's okay with that. And I really like the last line in the episode, well not the last line in the episode, but when the doctor is talking to Ashilda and telling her, you know why Clara told me not to get revenge on you, or do you remember the line?
No.
Basically, the doctor's saying, do you know why Clara said that to me? And Ashilda says, yeah, to protect you. And he says, no, to protect you. Because the doctor is furious. And remember, why did we get into this situation in the first place? Because Ashilda was hired by some mysterious entity because the doctor has some information that she's trying to get out of him. Or that this mysterious entity is trying to get out of him. And therefore, if she trades in the doctor, it can guarantee the safety of her street.
And so the doctor essentially turns himself over freely at the end of this. Clara is dead in the street. the Raven's gotten her. And he agrees, in order to save some others, to be taken prisoner.
And so where does it send him? To this mysterious castle in the middle of an endless ocean, which takes us to episode 11, called Heaven Sent, which is honestly probably one of the best episodes I've ever seen. Basically what happens is the doctor is trapped in this castle, chased by something that is one of his greatest fears from when he was a child, this woman who died, and they covered her with a veil and there were flies everywhere, and the idea of that terrified him. And so this entity stalks him, and every time he confesses something that's true, it stops. So he kind of gets the idea that he needs to confess to something, but he doesn't know what.
It was a great episode because it was Doctor Who solo. I think that was a great part of it. There's so many great supporting casts and characters in Doctor Who over the years. But for me, it's always a treat when we get something like this, especially we have such a strong doctor as Peter Capaldi that can carry the weight of an entire episode completely by himself. There was nobody else in that episode. There was some shots of Clara from behind whenever he would do his kind of the Sherlock type mind thing where he would go into his mind's
his mind TARDIS.
His mind TARDIS, you know, and it kind of, you know, he's doing all this in split seconds, but they play it out as him talking to himself and figuring things out, like when he jumps out the window with no plan. There were just some great moments, some great insight to the doctor. You know, he admits, you know, some of what he does really is showing off. You know, he likes the adventure of it. The whole mystery of the castle was just fantastic. Though at times it did remind me of the second Hunger Games movie where it would spin and reset itself to confuse the participants. But it worked well in this episode, and I completely agree with you. It was a fantastic episode. It was super strong.
And it was a mind bend because basically what happens is whatever transported him there is a backup of him in the computer. And so he finds a way out of this castle by punching through a diamond wall.
Well, it's actually something that's harder than diamond.
Harder than diamond.
Yeah.
But essentially like a mineral that's like 400 times stronger than diamond, punches through it every day and dies pretty much every day for 4
point-something billion years.
4 billion years. And the thing that strikes me the most about this too is when we get to episode 12, Hellbent, is he's still hell-bent on rescuing Clara. And so he has spent 4 billion years thinking about Clara and thinking about how to avenge Clara, but also trying to escape.
Well, and the best part of the episode too is the castle itself was such a trip. You're trying to figure out the mystery. What are they trying to get him to confess to? What is, like, who's doing this to him? What's in room 12 that he needs to unlock? There's just so much going on in that episode. And then at the end, there's one point where he finds that the ocean that's surrounding this castle is just filled with skulls, just filled with skulls. So it's his assumption that there have been other people sent here. Then it turns out that all of those skulls
are him.
Like, and so the great thing is that the doctor that materializes at the beginning of this episode has already been at this, I think, for, what was it, a couple thousand years, because he mentions something about the stars and how this appears to be a couple thousand years into the future based on the constellations. So this is an iteration of the Doctor. So he's already done this thousands of times, and it's not even just the punching through the wall. It's the whole, the whole process of it that he has to live through every time. So he comes out of the transporter
and has to learn.
He has to learn everything.
And solve all of his riddles.
Yep, solve all of his riddles, only to come to this wall, figure out that he needs to punch it as many times as he can before the veiled figure catches up to him, burns his face and, like, pretty much, kills him. And then he has to crawl to the top of the castle where the transporter is,
to reset himself,
plug himself into it, so then it regenerates a new doctor in the transporter, and he does that for 4.2 million years. And I think alone, once the figure burns him and gives him the life-threatening injuries to where he needs to go back up to the transporter, I think he mentions that it takes him a day and a half to crawl
back
to the
up.
top of the castle. So to go through that, it's unimaginable. It's crazy to even, like, try to wrap your head around.
And so he finally breaks through the diamond wall and basically appears out of a confession dial, a Gallifreyan confession dial, in some kind of, like, desert land. And a little boy runs up and he tells the little boy to run to the nearest town and find whoever's in charge and
Find the most important person you can.
And tell him that he's here. And if they ask how he got there, tell him he took the long way round.
Yep.
Which we found Gallifrey.
Which was weird. Now, one last final point about Hellbent that I want to go on, or Heaven Sent, before we go on to Hellbent, is I really liked the incorporating of the, I want to say it's a Grimm's fairy tale, or it's a piece of lore about the bird. When someone asks, someone gets sent to hell. I don't remember the whole story, and I'm sure someone out there knows.
It was a pretty cool story, though.
But, well, no, I know what the story is. I don't remember the context, but essentially someone gets sent to hell, and he asks them, how long is eternity? And to explain to them how long eternity is, they say, picture a mountain that's 100 miles around, and every 100 years, a little bird comes and sharpens its beak on the mountain, and then flies away. Once the mountain is completely gone from that action, 1 second of eternity has passed. And that's the story that's used to kind of convey what the Doctor goes through. And I just thought that was really cool.
It was a pretty cool story because he uses the word bird as a clue to himself.
Yep, and that's how he relates it back to saying, like, you're in for the long haul, dude. Like,
yeah.
It was rough.
What I thought was really weird, too, was the way he punched through that diamond wall in a perfect square.
Yeah, well, and the two, like, punching through that wall, I mean, essentially the second he punches it, he shatters his hand. Like, it's broken, and then he continues to punch it with this broken hand.
It's too bad he couldn't remember to go get that shovel.
That would have been helpful, I think. Yeah. But then that brings us to Hellbent. So like you said, we find out that he's wound up on Gallifrey.
And it's the Gallifreyan, like, High Council that has been looking for him.
Yes.
And they've trapped him because he has information on a thing called the hybrid.
Right.
Which we don't know anything about the hybrid.
They've mentioned, there's been some offhand comments about it throughout the series, but I didn't realize that was the focus. Another item to note too is that the little circle, the confession dial. Yeah, that he was trapped in. That was brought up to be his will and testament in the very first episode of the series.
Yeah, because he only gets it when he's about to die.
Yeah, so I thought that was an interesting twist, that it really was more of a confession dial, and it was the Gallifreyans that essentially put him in there. They were the ones that wanted him to get information on the hybrid. The episode starts off great, where he goes to the shack, which we saw,
which he spent most of his childhood in, and then we saw in the 50th anniversary special.
Yep, and we also saw it in the Capaldi's first series. It's the same shack where he is under the bed during that episode with the I can't remember what they were called, but
that scary under the bed monster.
Exactly that one.
And he spends days there, and the people who know that he's there revere him because he's the war doctor.
Yep.
And he's
the man who saved Gallifrey.
Saved Gallifrey.
Yep.
And the High Council is coming for him.
Well, my favorite part is he stays in there, and he won't come out until until the highest of the High Council comes down to get him himself. They send first they just send some troops down, and he pretty much doesn't say anything.
He draws a line in the sand and says, "Come back later."
Yep, he walks back into the shack without saying much of he doesn't say anything. They send down the general, who was in the 50th anniversary special, who was the one who told him, yes, go ahead and trap Gallifrey into that time bubble. He comes down, he kind of pokes his head out, walks right back in, and until they send down the Chancellor, does he ever say anything.
And even then, the Doctor has so much power on his side. He tells him to leave the planet, and and everyone except him complies because they trust him and love him so much, basically, that they will side with the Doctor no matter what.
Well, and the soldiers that he brings with him are ordered to shoot and kill the Doctor.
And they all miss.
Fire, and it's the outline of his body in the building behind him, which I thought was
a little cartoonish.
Well, it was cartoonish, but I thought it was great. Because they all just aim just a little to the right or a little high.
And even the high guy is you all missed.
Yeah, how does that happen? And then they all drop their guns. They end up on the other side of the line with the Doctor. Even the general does as well. And so then he has no choice but to leave the planet.
And when they go back to, I don't know, the capital of Gallifreyton.
St. Gallifrey.
St. Gallifrey. Gallifrey City. And they are they're having a conversation, and even the general's you sent him off the planet?
Yeah.
He's we're at the end of the universe. Because keep in mind, it's been 4 billion years. He's we're at the end of the universe. He's not going to find anywhere to go. And the Doctor's not my problem.
Yep. And then he also says, round up all of the other high command and tell them to be on the next shuttle out. So he's kicking out all of the Gallifrey High Command and pretty much taking over, saying he's
the leader of Gallifrey. The general still wants, they still need the information about the hybrid. And so the Doctor comes up with this clever idea to pull Clara out of the moment just before her death when she's in between heartbeats to kind of help him solve this mystery of the hybrid when really he's hell-bent on saving her.
Well, and then here comes the next total mind-blowing moment. You find out, Clara looks into his eyes and recognizes he's way older than the last time I saw him, way older. And I thought Jenna Louise Coleman did some great acting here when she finds out that he spent 4.2 billion years in this box to rescue her, because we find out that he was in that confession dial, and all he had to do was tell them whatever he knew about the hybrid, which it turns out was legitimately nothing. He didn't know anything about the hybrid. And if he said that, it would have been the truth, and he would have popped right out. He would have come out. But he held on to that secret, knowing that he actually knows nothing about the hybrid, and the second he said that, he could come out. This whole thing was a long con, 4.2 billion years of punching that wall to get out, for them to ask him and say, please tell us what you know. You went through all of that, and all you had to do was tell us what you know. Please now tell us what you know. This is a threat to Gallifrey and the entire universe. Tell us what you know. And he says, I need to consult with someone first. And that's how he convinces the Gallifreyans to let him use that machine that pulls him to there.
She is why would you do that?
Yeah, exactly.
Because she learns about this whole idea, the whole thing, and she learns that he's been doing this for 4.2 billion years. She's like, I was okay with death. Why don't you people understand that?
Yeah.
And to kind of go back to the beginning of this episode too, when we first see the Doctor, he's in Nevada.
In a very familiar diner.
The very familiar diner from Amy and Rory's episodes.
Which they even get name checked, which I always love when different iterations of the Doctor kind of call back to previous companions or characters that were in other regenerations of the Doctor. It kind of helps link it all together for me.
And he goes to the diner and runs into this waitress who looks and sounds surprisingly a lot like Clara, and begins to tell her this story of how he got here.
Yeah.
And basically, what it comes down to is the Doctor pulls her out of her time stream and tries to take her as far away from Gallifrey as possible. They jump into like a prefab TARDIS and go to the end of time, basically.
And it was great seeing classic like the very first Doctor from Doctor Who's TARDIS.
First gen TARDIS.
Yeah, first gen TARDIS. I thought that was a lot of fun.
And they make it to the 5 minutes before the universe ends, and she still doesn't have a heartbeat because she's still just her moment before death. And 5 minutes before the universe explodes, or whatever, there's a knock on the door. And who is it? It's Ashilda.
And it's always 4 knocks.
At the end of the universe, telling him, asking him what the hybrid is. The hybrid could honestly, when it comes down to it, be anything. But in this kind of situation, it's the Doctor and Clara. Because the hybrid is the thing that causes the most chaos. And the Doctor and Clara together causes the most chaos.
Right, and just the act of him taking her away, she's supposed to have died. That was a locked point in time.
Mm-hmm.
And they pulled her out with the intent of getting so the Doctor could confer with her to supposedly get some information about the hybrid, and then they would send her back and she would die as she was supposed to. Not doing that could cause a tear in space and time and destroy the whole universe. So the two of them acting together were the hybrid.
And Clara, from inside the TARDIS, is watching all of this. And the Doctor had a plan to basically wipe her memory and then take her...
To Donna Noble her.
Give her the old Donna Noble. And take her back and let her live her life without knowing the Doctor and her life with the Doctor. But she's been watching this conversation secretly and takes the device and recalibrates it so that the Doctor will lose his memories. And they come back into the TARDIS and she tells him she's been watching and, she recalibrated this memory device. And
so if he hits the button, he'll forget her instead, in which he doesn't believe that she...
Well, he even says, who knows if you did it right?
Yeah.
And Clara's like, oh, watch me. And I really like this moment because it kind of paints Clara as a villain. In a slight villainous light.
Yeah, well, I mean, he doesn't buy that she had the capacity to use the sonic sunglasses to do this or to do it right. And the whole exchange between the two of them, they come to the agreement that, okay, well, we obviously can't pal around together anymore. The Doctor tells her, this has to end, and it has to end now. And I'm sorry that this is the option that I've come up with, but it's the only way. And then she explains to him that she's switched it. But they come to the agreement that we're going to press this button. And whoever's memory gets wiped is whoever's memory gets wiped. And that's the way it's going to be. And that whole exchange leading up to the pressing of the button, I thought was awesome. It was dramatic. It was sad, but it was also, there was some funny, little quips back and forth. It was Clara at her best. And she's a companion that I have more or less not really enjoyed. But this season, and I would even argue quite a bit of last season, she's kind of grown on me a little bit. Mm-hmm. I was sad to see her time come to an end when all was said and done, even if I feel like she overstayed her welcome just a little bit. And
so basically what happens is the Doctor's retelling the story to this waitress, not knowing that she's Clara.
Yep.
Because he doesn't remember her. And the diner itself is the prefab TARDIS, and then Clara and Ashilda go off on wild, wacky companion adventures, I assume.
They have the chameleon circuit be the diner, mm-hmm. and as they take off, Ashilda's
you see the TARDIS flying through space, and then you see the diner flying through space.
And Ashilda mentions that she doesn't know how to work the chameleon circuit, or that it's fizzled out, or something like that again. And so they're out doing their adventures, which I think is great. I hope they don't revisit that. If they revisit it, I hope it's not too soon.
I don't think they will.
But I hope they don't, and I hope it's just their send-off. But so overall, how do you feel about Series 9?
I loved it. And I don't say that. I get people asking me all the time if I'm a Doctor Who fan because I have so much criticism. But I actually loved the finale and I loved this season, except for that one episode about the Eyeblingers.
It was hard for me to see where the season was going, the first half of the season this year. The second half of the season was incredibly strong, and I think it kind of made the first half of the season really click for me. And I thought this was probably one of the stronger seasons of New Who that we've had in several years, I think. And it's really great. And plus, best part is it wraps up with him getting a new sonic screwdriver, so we can say lovey to the sonic sunglasses. And
that about does it for us. But Christmas episode's coming up December 25th, so maybe you'll see us again for the Christmas episode.
The husbands of
River Song.
So,
Ugh.
yeah, we'll talk
Cool.
about that one when it airs. So thank you for watching, everyone. We'll catch you next season.